I'm focused on his spirit cause it keeps me from his fire. The Holy Ghost was with me, so my fear I leave behind. My sins were all diminished when he took that breath and died. And if you think I'ma give up on my God, the devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie.
Ooh, hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking, of course, about the big geopolitical news. The U.S. did decide to drop some bombs on Iran, and it's funny because people are talking about like the jets and stuff that we used, and they're like a Cheeto destroyed Iran with a Dorito, and there's tons of very interesting and patriotic takes from a very unserious generation on the likes of TikTok. Of course, there are people parroting what different Democrats are saying about how Trump needs to be impeached and so on, because he didn't notify Congress, but he has 48 hours to notify Congress. He does not need their permission to go do strikes like that, and people are mad because he told some Republicans and not Democrats, but they didn't want it leaked, obviously, so I can totally understand why they didn't do that. But it's interesting, the different commentary surrounding like different folks on the left and then some folks who claim to be on the right, in their opposition, like the twins. Gosh, their name just escaped me. The two twins who were on Steven Crowder's show all the time, and then they do their own thing, and people think that they're conservative and stuff, but they've been someone runs their Facebook page, so they've been all pro Trump or whatever. Yes, courageous what Trump did in Iran and stuff. God bless our troops. And on TikTok, they're just wild and they don't like what's going on. So there's this big contrast from their real opinions and what someone is, I guess, being paid to write. And but I don't want them to have nukes, so I'm glad that he did what he did, and I don't want boots on the ground, at least not for like some kind of long regime change type of nation building. I don't care if the people of Iran want to change who's in charge, but their destiny is up to them. Hodge twins, thank you, Abel. It's the Hodge twins. The Hodge twins are the ones who their Facebook is like totally different than their actual Twitter page. But I also want to talk about a story in Michigan. Yesterday there was a church that was attacked. I know when people first started hearing about it, they were concerned if it was like some kind of act of terror, but it looks like it was some guy just had some kind of mental breakdown. But the church members were able to take him out. So praise God for that, because there could have been mass. It just could have been a massacre if they weren't on their guard to take him out. And also, you guys know that story about in Minnesota, how there was a man who was appointed by Tim Walz, and there's been fights about whether he was Republican or Democrat, because Democrats are trying to claim, well, he was Republican, his neighbor said he was Republican. Turns out, and you probably haven't heard too much in the news cycle for a past couple days, turns out he's nuts. Shocker. But he wrote a letter claiming that Tim Walz wanted him to take out people, including Amy Klobuchar, so Tim Walz could run for Senate. I'm not telling you this because I think that's true, but at least no evidence has pointed to that, and apparently Tim Walz isn't running for Senate. But the guy is nuts, and he was doing it allegedly for Tim Walz, so I don't think it's because he's some kind of MAGA freak like the left is trying to pretend. So another thing that's been debunked, but we'll get through all those things today. But before we jump into everything, I want to know, I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I got this fan on because something's wrong with my air. It is not cool enough, and I'm dying right now. I think it's definitely like 90 degrees ish in Michigan right now. When I was in my car, it said it was like 103 degrees. So it's hot. You know, I got like a rag to wipe my face here and there. Oh, I got some lipstick on it. Um, it's just hot. I hope you guys are cool wherever you are, because I am not. I am not. So just FYI, if you can hear it, I'm sorry. I gotta have it on because I'm really dying. I'm really dying. I hope you guys had a good weekend. Oh gosh, that's terrible. AC. April ain't got no AC. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough. Yeah, but I hope you guys have had a good weekend. That it was eventful in a good sort of way, but people have steadily been talking about the big news of the day. So I want to start off with an interesting TikTok that I saw. This person usually um, makes content about movies, and he did make one about movies, but it's very topical as far as what's going on in the news today. If you hadn't made these connections before, so this is pretty interesting to start off with.
So the United States can just send bombers to another country and take out their nuclear sites without any kind of a declaration of war or permission from Congress or any of that stuff. Not only can they, but Hollywood actually made a film about this specific operation 3 years ago. And it's actually crazy to go back and watch it now. If you go look it up, it's an obscure little movie called Top Gun Maverick, and it grossed $1.5 billion. And I know what you're saying. You're saying, Jason, I've seen this movie. I don't remember the word Iran being spoken even once. But others of you who also saw this movie just now for the first time are saying, wait a second, what country were they bombing? Because the film just says that it is an underground uranium enrichment plant that is a threat to our allies in the region. They carefully never say what country it's in. And then they say that the Pentagon has decided to assemble a strike team to take it out. Like there's not even any reference to any branch of the government making this decision. But as many articles pointed out at the time, there's only one country on planet Earth that all of this applies to. A country that does not yet have nuclear weapons, but is trying to enrich uranium to build them. But just to erase any remaining doubts, it is a key plot point in the film and a key part of the climax that this enemy country has American F-14 fighter jets. That is the plane made famous to the American public because it was in the original 1986 film Top Gun. That is an extremely weird plot point because what enemy country would ever have a combination of newer Russian fighter jets and 1970s era American fighter jets? There's only one country in the world that still has them, Iran. We sold them to Iran back when that country was one of our allies prior to the revolution in 1979. This screen grab of an F-14 on the ground about to get blown up, this is not from the film. This was released by the Israeli military after their recent airstrikes. The filmmakers could have created any purely fictional scenario they wanted. They did this instead. They could have invented an entirely fictional country and said its name. Movies do that all the time. I am not saying that this film was put out there as like a secret plan to convince the Americans this is a good idea. They didn't have to. Half of our action movies are already about this, about a small group of heroes taking unilateral action. When Iron Man gets his suit in the first movie, the first thing he does is fly to Afghanistan and attack some terrorists. Whether or not it's the right thing to do in real life, in fiction, everybody loves it. And Tom Cruise knows that better than anybody.
Yeah, so pretty interesting. RC said you've never seen the movie. So I've actually never seen the first Top Gun film. I assume there's a possibility that I could have been a child sat in front of the TV while my parents watched it or something like that and just have no memory of it. But as and I don't even know if that's the case, but I have never seen the Top Gun film, and so I had family members that went to go see the Maverick movie, and they liked it. But I heard so many people talk about how good the film was, including people who were in the military who I knew flew fighter pilots. They said that it was such a good film, and it had such good word of mouth. And this was like era of COVID, and Tom Cruise was just determined to have this film be in theaters because he wanted to help the movie theaters. He didn't want it to be on stream. He wanted people to have the experience of actually being in the film, but he wanted to make sure that he could try to make that a very big outcome for theaters that were really, really losing money during that time. So it was like exclusively in theaters. So he was fighting really hard to make sure that people could do the work, get paid, and so on. So there was just a lot going on. And then I knew that it was gonna I heard that it was possible that it was going to pass a record for one of the Marvel movies. I think one of the I guess maybe the first Black Panther film, and I just thought it would be kind of funny if it did beat it. So I'm like, I want to contribute. So by the way, I did like the first Black Panther movie. I enjoyed it. I had fun. I think it's overhyped though, like seriously overhyped, but I did really enjoy it. Like it's like some people have it like their top tier, one of the best Marvel films. It's mid tier to me, but I had fun. I liked it. But I did think it would be funny if Maverick surpassed it or whatever. So I'm like, okay, well, let me contribute to that. So I did, and I really enjoyed the film. It was really good. And I mean, there's moments when you're watching with the planes and the training, and it's just, kind of high adrenaline, and you're pretty sort of revved up. And there is this Val Kilmer was in it, reprising his role. And he got his interaction with Tom Cruise and stuff, and he passed away in the film, and now it's he passed away recently. So it was really, really good film. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go check it out. Because I'm probably gonna rewatch it now. I guess everybody just assumed that it was. I don't know. Actually, I don't know if everybody assumed, but I did notice they didn't say that it was Iran when we were watching the film. But with those sort of threats, it just seemed like it fit that it was Iran. So Ben Shapiro was talking about how he was telling people like, no, they're just gonna drop like really big bombs, and it's not gonna be like Top Gun Maverick. And apparently it kind of was how they did the operation. So but people who write these films or consult in these films, I'm not saying they're leaking classified intel, but a lot of people do research on this stuff. And so when something happens in real life, it's not that they predicted the future, but they could just kind of figure out how they made reasonable storylines based off of stuff that they had, and it just kind of flowed into that outcome. Like during COVID, people were looking at an episode of Dead Zone, and it's really eerie if you go find the episode of Dead Zone when there's a coronavirus. And because this is made way before like the pandemic. I mean, Dead Zone was like I don't know, 2000s, early 2000s, I think. I don't think it was like 90s, but it was a long time ago. And there was an episode when there was like a virus that had broken out, and he even talked about a drug, like a malaria, the malaria drug that people were trying to use. And so he like had if you don't know the plot to Dead Zone, Michael Anthony Hall, who was in like a bunch of movies like The Breakfast Club and stuff, Weird Science. He, got older, obviously, but he was in the show Dead Zone, and I think he maybe had a near-death experience or something and could see the future. And so he ended up injecting himself to try to help figure out how to solve it. And he ended up telling the scientists like about the drug hydroxychloroquine or something, and they're like, no, that's for malaria or something, and like, no, it suppresses the such and such. Like, he was just like spitting out the science. And if you go back and watch the clip, you can find it on YouTube. It was eerie, but they didn't predict the future. They just knew the science from that disease and about the hydroxychloroquine and stuff. So that was another thing during the pandemic. I'm like, if they could make this episode of TV way back when, based off of just stuff they read from the CDC and other science journals or whatever, and come up with this cure then, and people are saying that hydroxychloroquine and all this stuff is working now. I'm like, why are we trying to pretend like it doesn't do anything? Do you guys remember that time? I know a lot of people have blocked off COVID or whatever, but they were saying like, don't take it. And there was one person in Detroit who was a state legislator, and Trump was saying to take it. So she went ahead and she took it. And so she got better, and she attributed her life being saved to Donald Trump and his advice. And the Democrats ended up censuring her. They punished her for, I don't know, just surviving, for taking it, for complimenting Trump. It was such a bizarre time. Yeah, but anyway, if you haven't seen Top Gun, I recommend you go ahead and you look it up and you see it. So I guess the question for a lot of people in their minds is like, what's next? Donald Trump had tweeted something about regime change. So people are like, oh my gosh, look, now it's regime change. You know, this is Donald Trump isn't George W. Bush, and the circumstances, you know, aren't the same with Iran that they were with Afghanistan and Iraq and so on. It could be that Trump put out the tweet about the regime change to, I guess, kind of troll those folks a bit, and to just kind of put it out there, like, if you want to revolt and change things, now's the time, because the people don't like the leadership. They're very oppressive, especially to women, which, you know, we've had a lot of conversations about that, especially with the stupid stuff that Whoopi Goldberg was saying about how being in Iran is not worse than, I guess, being a black person in America, which is ridiculous. So if they're very weak right now. They're dealing with Israel, and, you know, Israel, them attacking so many of their weapons cleared the skies for the US to come in and do their operation as well. So good on them. It was a good time for us to drop those bombs. But if they want to do that, it's up to them to determine their future. If regime change happens, that's fine. What I am not interested in, and I don't think Trump is interested in, and I don't necessarily think Israel is interested in, is them babysitting a country for 20 years. And I don't necessarily think that was the original intention of Bush and them back in the days. My sister read Condoleezza Rice's autobiography, and you know, she said it's kind of sad because they really did believe in the mission, or at least maybe Condoleezza Rice did. I was listening to some of it while we were driving together, and it kind of sounded like Dick Cheney. It was always Dick Cheney. Like she was more like, let's do diplomacy, and he's just like, boom, 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 boom. So, but Donald Trump, he campaigned against, you know, the wars in Iraq and stuff, and thought it was a mess. And if Donald Trump is anything, he's not unreasonable, but he is very stubborn about some certain things. And he's been very consistent about some things like the tariffs, never wanted to get ripped off, whatever. Those are things he's been pretty consistent on. He's been consistent about Iran not being able to get a nuclear weapon. But he likes to in and out, like, we'll blow you up. America's great. Thank you for your attention. Dropping an American flag on my profile. We're the best of the best. And then that's it. People were saying that it was going to be like the end of the world when we moved our embassy in Jerusalem. Guess what? Nothing happened. He killed Soleimani. That was it, Baghdadi, do the operation. It's done. He's ready to move on. But he doesn't want Iran to continuously keep being a threat. So they needed to take out the nuclear facilities. And Israel took out their leadership, took off some of their scientists. It was a bloodbath. So they are in a rough spot. And on top of that, Israel has been taking out their terror proxies. So Hezbollah, Hamas, they're crippled. So I think that's a good thing. There is an interesting narrative going around saying, oh, well, Iran says they have all these terror proxies, and the United States, there's this one kid named Dean. He's been on Jubilee a few times, and he has a lot of followers. It's in the millions, like on TikTok, and he debates and stuff all the time. And he thought it was stupid for Trump to attack Iran because they have terror proxies. And basically, I guess he wanted us to capitulate to them because they say they have terror proxies. I'm like, you don't project weakness like that to a country like Iran. You don't do that. And them saying that they have terror proxies that could strike at any moment, you want to find out what they're doing and maybe proceed with caution, but you don't just bow down to their whims and let the terrorists know that you have them by the you-know-what. It's not very wise to do that. And then if they're an organization that's willing to put terror proxies all over the United States, do you think it's going to be better if they have a nuclear bomb? That doesn't make any sense to me either. And Dean was a big Hillary. I'm sorry, not Hillary. He's quite young. Kamala person and Joe Biden person. They get paid to be influencers on the left and so on. It's important to know that I don't doubt that there's terrorist cells in the United States of America, and we don't know how many people are over here. But that's one reason why we need our border to be secure. And so I'm going to read to you some of these stats. So when these Democrats complain about the border and the situation in Iran, just let them know that Biden and Kamala Harris got us into quite the pickle. So this is from Bill Mulligan. He does a lot of content involving the border. He's a good account to follow if you don't. Per senior CPB source, there were 1,504 Iranian nationals caught crossing the border illegally during the Biden administration through FY21 through FY24, 729, 49% of whom were released in the United States. Year by year breakdown of Iranian nationals caught by the Border Patrol at the southern border. 21, it was 48. 22, we got 197, and 23, 462, and then 24, 797. Year by year breakdown of Iranians released into the U.S. by Border Patrol. 12, then 40, then 229, and 448. It's unclear how many of these Iranians were on the terror watch list, as the Biden administration repeatedly denied my FOIA request and appeals for the data. That's bullcrap. Citing the privacy concerns of the people on the list and minimal public interest in disclosing the data. Holy crap. do y'all think there's minimal public interest in knowing how many Iranians crossing the border illegally may have been on the terror watch list? Do you think that's a minimal public interest thing, or do you think that's a really, really important thing that we have a right to know? I think we have a right to know that. I would have rather them had the border closed and not release people into the interior because they didn't want to have them hauled up, like the kids in cages, like in the Obama era or whatever. At first in the Biden administration, there was a bunch of people like in the being held up and like lockup and stuff, and then they just didn't want those pictures out, so they just kept releasing people into the interior, and they give them little cell phones and say, "Here's your court date. I mean, this is your court date, or we'll text you. Make sure you keep your phone. That's how we're gonna track you." Who knows if they'll get rid of that phone? It just was really absurd. That's messed up, guys. It's really messed up. There were over 2 million recorded gotaways at the border during the Biden administration because they were never caught. No way of knowing where they're from. All Iranians are special interest aliens due to national security concern, and they are supposed to receive enhanced vetting by DHS. Almost half of the Iranians encountered by the Biden patrol were released into the U.S. So there's reasons to be concerned, I guess, if we're just going to be frank. But that's a good reason right there to never vote Democrat again. If they're going to be so silly about the border. If they're going to be so crazy about the border. Now, Trump needs to up his numbers if he wants to match Obama's, deportation numbers. But from my understanding, I had read, I think last week, that Trump and the Border Patrol haven't released anyone into the interior of the United States with the border. They shut that down. There's no need for Governor Greg Abbott to send just streams of illegal aliens into Chicago or something under the Trump doctrine. So to the people concerned about what might happen, and I am starting to see people say if something happens domestically, it's Trump's fault. Like if there's some kind of retaliation. And I don't know, maybe they're prepping themselves because these numbers aren't good. And there's all these gotaways that we're not sure where they came from. It wasn't just people acted like if you were concerned about the border crossings, then you hated, I don't know, Mexicans or something like that. Not understanding that people are coming from all over the world to get through the southern border. All over the world. So, and by the way, Trump brought that up when he first announced, like when he did his speech where people are like, oh my gosh, he's saying the Mexicans are all rapists, which he didn't say at all. But that was the narrative. It was such a strong narrative. They kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And let me see if I can pull up that that interaction, that video, so you guys can see that it was pretty much he was right on the money at the time when he was talking about that, but they just sensationalized it. But he did talk about how people are coming from all over. And I've seen videos and showed you guys videos of people illegally crossing the border saying, hey, you guys need to vet these people because I'm concerned about some of these people. They seem really dangerous. And that's coming from people who are illegally entering the country. They're scared of who they were crossing with. So I know I have the clip in my Trump hoax video. So I know some of you have seen it. Let me find it real quick. But there was a lot on the line, and our border is a national security issue, but they just did not care. They did not care. Everything was so partisan with the Democrats, and Kamala Harris was super open borders. And I don't know what all goes through the head of Joe Biden, but he knew better, or he should have known better. Orange man bad, they say. Yeah, they say. Okay. All Mexicans are rapists. So when Donald Trump came on, that was the hoax. I'm not saying that they were. I'm quoting the hoax. Just FYI, that's the context of that. To the scene, when he decided to run the first time, immigration was his big point, where he really, got a lot of ground above his competitors who were kind of squishy and talking and had considered amnesty and other stuff. And Trump was very hard on the issue, and people gravitated toward that. And so he talked about the kinds of people who are coming across the border, and he talked about they're not sending their best, they're sending in rapists and other sorts of people. And people interpret that as Donald Trump doesn't like Mexicans and he thinks Mexicans are rapists.
When do we beat Mexico at the border? They're laughing at us, at our stupidity. And now they're beating us economically. They are not our friend, believe me. But they're killing us economically. The U.S. has become a dumping ground for everybody else's problems. Thank you. It's true. And these are the best and the finest. When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime. They're rapists. And some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting. And it only makes common sense. It only makes common sense. They're sending us not the right people. It's coming from more than Mexico. It's coming from all over South and Latin America, and it's coming probably from the Middle East. But we don't know, because we have no protection and we have no competence. We don't know what's happening. And it's got to stop. And it's got to stop fast.
Now, I think, and that's my Trump hoax video on my YouTube channel. If you guys have not watched it, where I go through debunking the top 10 Trump hoaxes. So one of them was the Trump said all Mexicans are rapists, which you just heard it. He clearly did not say that. I have the little girl who's on the Time magazine cover who was crying, she was never separated from her mom. I have the injecting people with bleach, that he gassed protesters for a photo op. That was a hoax too. So I got a lot of good hoaxes on there if you haven't seen that video. And so I encourage you guys to go ahead and watch it if you haven't. But yeah, he never called all Mexicans rapists, and he's in the video he said they're probably coming from the Middle East too. And I don't know how bad the problem was then in 2015, because that's like when that would have been, if not 16, but it was probably 15. But we know it's happened under the Biden administration for sure, because we let everybody know that basically the borders were open and people would come and say, I'm here because of Joe Biden. And now there's less people coming in because they know that Trump means business and that Trump will send people back. So we cannot, I feel for some people who tried to set down roots and do well in this country, but at the same time, you really cannot encourage bad behavior. So there needs to be some kind of of penance, some kind of punishment for coming here illegally. And one of the kindest things is to send people back. It's not, like we chop off people's heads or legs or something and say, this is what you get for crossing the border. They act like it's so inhumane to get a free trip home. Anyway, I pray that nothing happens. I was concerned over the weekend about, yesterday when I heard this story in Wayne, Michigan, but it wasn't an act of terror from what we know. From what we do know, according to this news story, it was a man who had deep mental health issues. So I'm going to go ahead and just run through the story real quick. A couple of you watching are from Michigan. If you attend, I guess really anything, but church, I'm assuming every church, basically, at least in the state of Michigan, probably got somebody who's packing. That's just our way. That's just our way. Security guard kills Michigan church gunman, preventing large-scale mass shooting, according to police. An alleged active shooter intent on attacking a Michigan church on Sunday was shot and killed by a security guard and another church staff member who prevented a large-scale mass shooting, police said. The shooting unfolded around 11:15 local time at Cross Point Community Church in Detroit, suburb of Wayne, according to the Wayne Police Department. We are grateful for the heroic actions of the church's staff members who undoubtedly saved many lives and prevented a large-scale mass shooting, Wayne Police Chief Ryan Strong said during the press conference on Sunday. The gunman was identified as Brian Anthony Browning, 31, from Romulus, Michigan. His motivations are unknown, according to police, though officials said he appeared to be suffering from a mental health crisis. So I guess I should preface that it seems that it's a mental health issue. I guess he could have been radicalized, or something like that. Just putting it out there. But it seems like this isn't, like, people were concerned that, active terror was already like happening, and I don't think that evidence is out for something like that. The story was posted a couple hours ago, so just wanted to clarify that. Browning had no criminal history. His mother is a member of the church, and the suspect attended 2 or 3 services over the course of the last year, police said. Police said the suspect exited his Nissan truck wearing a tactical vest, armed with a long gun and handgun, where he approached the church building and began firing his weapon. Several staff members from the church approached the gunman, police said, adding that the parishioner struck the gunman with his vehicle as the gunman shot the vehicle repeatedly. At least 2 staff members shot the gunman, causing fatal wounds. One staff member, a member of the security team, was shot once in the leg by the suspect. They underwent a successful surgery and are expected to recover, police said. The church staff members do not wish to be identified, police said. Please pray for our healing, the strengthening of our faith, and the continued bond of unity brought about through this shared traumatic experience. And for the family of Brian Browning, they are hurting too, Bobby Kelly Jr., the pastor of Cross Point Community Church, said in a statement on Monday. At this point, the Wayne Police Department is still investigating this incident with the assistance of multiple local, state, and federal partners. A bomb sniffing dog was brought to the scene by the Michigan State Police, and the police bomb squad was also brought to the scene, according to officials, but there was no immediate confirmation from the police that explosives were involved in the incident. Our leadership and support teams are on the ground and the scene of Wayne, Michigan, providing assistance and investigative support, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino said in a statement. It is so wild to me that Dan Bongino is like the Deputy Director of the FBI. The church shooting came during a heightened threat environment across the country following the U.S. attack overnight in Iran that destroyed a severely degraded 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities, according to the White House officials. Police said there's no evidence to believe that this is an act of violence or any connection with the conflict in the Middle East. So, that's good, I guess. But as always, if you know somebody who seems like something ain't right, see something, say something. I don't know if they saw signs or noticed signs, but you can never be too careful today. And thank God for the church members who acted quickly and took him out. You know, ran him down with the car and, you know, stopped him. And that's terrible for the family. I can't imagine. That's a terrible thing to do to your family and to do to their church and to plan to do. I just hope they can find healing, and if you do pray, you know, honor their request and keep on praying for them. Another interesting story, I think this might have came out on Saturday. I don't think it was Friday. If it was maybe Friday night. I think it was Friday night. I think I learned about it after I got home from church. I don't think we talked about this. So you guys know there was a story, I guess last week or so, about the man from Minnesota who killed 2 elected officials. And there is a big debate on the right and the left about this man's political affiliation. Because some people are like, oh, he unalived them because, I'm sorry, I'm not on TikTok. He killed them because, you know, one of them voted with the Republicans on immigration. And people are like, no, this guy's a Republican, because his neighbor said he was a Republican. And people on the right are like, that doesn't make any sense. He's appointed by Tim Walz. And you could be a Republican and be appointed by Tim Walz, I guess. But Tim Walz is pretty far left. Minnesota is just far left, crazy place anyway. But Tim Walz is pretty out there. And so you had people on the left who were really insisting that this was, you know, MAGA violence. Amy Klobuchar said something about abortion briefly, a little bit, like when she was being interviewed, to insinuate that this was a political, obviously it was a political attack, but he had right leanings, and that was leading to him to kill certain people. Now, I wonder how much she knew at the time when she gave some of those interviews, because Tim Walz like immediately said that it was a political attack, that it was politically motivated. And he said it so fast that people are like, this is irresponsible. But I wonder how much he knew so quickly. So there was a letter that this man wrote, and it was a lot of incoherent nonsense, according to people associated with the letter who knew of the letter and read it. But he wanted to kill people, including Amy Klobuchar, and he wanted to do that on behalf of Tim Walz. And he claimed that he was trained by the military off of the books, and he wanted to take her out so he could run for Senate. So Tim Walz could. Now, if you're a MAGA right winger, I don't know why you'd want Tim Walz to win in the Senate. So I don't know. That just kind of seems like that settles the conversation there. Because again, he's not just Democrat, he's very, very far left. In case you've already forgotten about Tim Walz, Tim Walz was Kamala Harris's VP choice. And so he had other people on his list as well. Now, there's no evidence that we've seen, I guess, that proves that Tim Walz was in cahoots with him, that he had hired him or wanted to do those things to take out Amy Klobuchar and other folks so he could run for the Senate. From my understanding, he doesn't even plan to do that. But the man is just crazy. The man is just crazy. Sometimes I know that in this hyper political partisan world, we want to just jump to talking about it nonstop, but sometimes people are legitimately just crazy. They've snapped. They have some kind of break in reality for whatever reason. And it's not about politics. Now, the people who do decide to do what they do, they are responsible. Like Bernie Sanders, he didn't kill. Well, I guess nobody ended up dying, but it was very close. A lot of people could have died the day that they had the congressional baseball shooting. The guy who did that and could have killed many Republicans, he was a Bernie guy. And according to some people who were there on the scene, he was shooting at them saying this is for healthcare. So that was terrorism. That was politically motivated. Obviously politically motivated. He was targeting the Republicans, and he was upset about the healthcare. And this was at a time that Democrats were saying Republicans are killing grandma because of how they're voting on, the different bills, Obamacare or whatever. And so they're responsible for their rhetoric. At the end of the day, that man was responsible for deciding that he was going to take matters into his own hand and kill people. And people should be, at the end of the day, more responsible with their rhetoric. Now, sometimes we have conversations about stuff and it is what it is. It is what it is. I don't want someone to go blow up an abortion clinic because I'm having conversations with people about how they're killing children. Now, they are doing it. That's what the abortion is. But there are different ways to fight those kinds of battles. So if you ever hear someone say crazy stuff like that, you got to call the police. If you think someone like that is having a breakdown, you got to stop them. Like, there are other ways to try to bring about positive change in the world and not resorting to cold-blooded murder like the Luigi guy who killed that United Healthcare CEO. But the left celebrated that. That was another thing about this Minnesota stuff. I'm like, if this person was on the right, we would just denounce them. We denounce you. It's evil. You can't just take people's lives like that. It's wrong. But the Luigi guy, they're like, oh my gosh, he's hot. And maybe he has a point. Maybe he actually has a point. So people aren't talking too much about the Tim Walz thing. He's probably, I don't know. They all probably feel terrible about what's going on. Obviously, I mean, he's the governor. The people who were killed were legislators in the state, so they have a more personal relationship with everything that's going on. And to think that there were other targets, it is very tragic. And then he appointed the guy, and there's like tragic, very unfortunate sayings from Tim Walz. You guys remember when he was debating Vance, and he said that he was friends with shooters, like friends with school shooters or something. So that was a heck of a slip up. But anyway, if any of them knew about this letter early and still decided to push out the political partisan, oh, this guy is MAGA, and you're trash. That really trashy if people had that advanced knowledge and still decided to try to direct the narrative in that kind of way. So if anything else interesting pops up about that story, I'll be sure to let you guys know what I find out. But that was very fascinating to me. And when I did a quick TikTok about it late on Friday night, I think, and people are like, oh, I'm already not hearing about the story. Yeah, I don't think they want to talk too much about it now because they can't use it for their own sort of political reasons. So, but I don't think that Tim Walz hired the man to kill Amy Klobuchar. I just want to set the record straight on that. Another thing I want to talk about before I let you guys go is some of the commentary from, I don't know, some of these right-wing folks about, or they're not even right-wing, but or or some people have determined that they were right wing. Like I mentioned the Hodge twins earlier. They've been saying some really kind of off the wall stuff about Israel and Jews and so on. And they're very much against the strikes in Iran and anything like that. But on their Facebook, it was very pro, like America's great. Trump showed such courage, etc., etc. Just a very clear contrast. And so some people called them out, and they said that we don't personally post on our Facebook. We got a lady that runs it, and because we don't have the time. And they said that bleep sounds like Chat GPT wrote it. Our personal takes are only on X. And they said, so you're disingenuous. Your Facebook account is a fraud, and you don't approve your secretary's post on Facebook. And they said not disingenuous, just retarded is what they said. So if you follow them on Facebook, just know that you're not actually following the Hodge twins. It's somebody else posting things that they probably feel are things that people on the right would basically say. So there's that. Glenn Greenwald was dunked on a bit. Now Glenn is not on the right. We talked about Glenn a few weeks ago. If you don't recall the story, Glenn Greenwald, there was some stuff that was released. We don't know how it got released. Some people suspect that he did it himself. I don't know. But some time ago, he hired a male escort, and he was dressed up in, I don't know, some kind of like schoolgirl outfit. And he had like a Palestine flag or something on him too. And he was like licking the guy's, I'm sorry, this is gross, licking the guy's toes and like licking his spit off the floor and other things too. There's a video. I didn't watch the video. I didn't want to watch the video. Thank God I didn't see the video or even clips or anything of it. I saw just some screenshots of him in his little outfit. And Twitter was pretty good about taking a lot of that stuff down anyway. I don't want to know more than I know. I don't want to see more than I've seen. And so Glenn was like, I did it and it was consensual. It's not a big deal. And some people are like, well, that's gross. And that's degenerate behavior. And it really just kind of speaks to a lack of good judgment. And there were some people on the right who just came out of the woodwork to say, well, I stand by Glenn because he's one of the most important journalists of our time. And I thought that was weird. I thought that was strange because he worked on like, I think was it Snowden leaks or something. And, he's got some cred, but I've known some things that he's covered and talked about. I'm like, okay, well, that's wrong. That's really biased there. That's not how those events took place. And so I'm like, I don't really think he's that not necessarily trustworthy as a journalist from my perspective. I mean, he might cover some things that I don't know as much about, but things that are in my wheelhouse that I've been really watching, I'm like, okay, he's got a very wrong perspective about that. And so people were dunking on him because Dave Smith had tweeted, okay, fine, Iran doesn't have nukes, but you have heard the chants. We must go to war because of the chants. And he's talking about the Death to America chants that they like to chant. And Glenn Greenwald said, after 9/11, Americans asked, why do they hate us? He said the neocon lie was for our freedoms. The Bin Laden letter was censored when young people found it in 2024 because it gave the real reasons Why does Iran chant death to America, but not death to Argentina or Japan or Spain? Now, the rhetoric from, or the things that people like Glenn is what he's trying to espouse, or stuff that Dave Smith and other people try to espouse, is that the reason why these people in the Middle East hate us is because we are, I don't know, just nosy busybodies who are up in their business, getting involved, destabilizing stuff, etc., etc. And I was like, or maybe there is more to it than that. They can be mad about that stuff, sure, but they do have an ideology that is just opposed to us. And it was interesting him mentioning the Bin Laden letter, because the Bin Laden letter definitely talked about how they didn't like our freedoms. So there was a lot of responses. This was a good one. The Bush administration said, "Hey, they hate us for our freedoms because it was a secular, politically correct version of they hate us because we are kuffar." They were scared of telling us the truth. What bin Laden wrote to America was propaganda, which is why he mentioned bleep he knows Westerners care about, like climate change. But what he wrote to fellow Muslims or Al Qaeda members is probably closer to what he really believes. Being a simp for bin Laden should disgust you, but he's been one for 25 years already. This low-life deviant is the absolute worst. So, and there was more to it. People pointed out that in his letter, like he talked about America and our perversion, and they totally wouldn't like the different stuff that Glenn did, the things that I talked to you about. But they said this is another response. Glenn's bleep would have been thrown off of a roof if he lived in a country following Osama's ideology when his gross foot-looking video leaked. Yet Glenn is a pick-me for anyone who hates America and the West. Also, he's lying. Here's Osama in his own words hating on American freedoms. So he said, the second thing we call you to do is to stop your oppression, lies, immorality, and debauchery that has spread among you. We call you to a people of manners, principles, honor, and purity, to reject immoral acts of fornication, homosexuality, intoxicants, gamblings, and trading with interest. Trading with interest. Okay. You are a nation that permits acts of immorality, and you consider them to be pillars of personal freedom. You have continued to sink down this abyss from level to level until incest has spread amongst you, in the face of which neither your sense of honor nor your laws object. As for the second question that we want to answer, what are we calling you to, and what do we want from you? The first thing that we are calling you to is Islam, the religion of unification of God, of freedom from associating partners with him, and rejection of this, of complete love of him, the exalted, of complete submission to his laws, and of the discarding of all the opinions, orders, theories, and religions which contradict with the religion he sent down his prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Islam is the religion of all the prophets and makes no distinction between them, peace be upon them all. So I'm sure Glenn knows that Osama bin Laden actually did hate our freedoms. And if he could get his way from what he really wants, Glenn, I don't know, would be stoned or, like they said, thrown off a building or whatever. I mean, and Glenn isn't just a gay man. That, like, like the stuff he was doing in that video, at least from what I heard, I would not watch it. And I'm glad I didn't like stumble upon a clip. I'm glad I was spared from that. But it's just It's just nonsense. And then he said, well, why don't they bomb Argentina, or saying death to America? Like, why are they against America, not Argentina? And someone mentioned, does he not know about the time Iran worked with their proxy Hezbollah to massacre 85 Argentinian Jews in a terrorist attack? So they've attacked Argentina. They've attacked Argentina. So when people were sticking up for Glenn, it's like, he's the greatest, one of the most important, greatest reporters of our time. I didn't understand where that was coming from. I didn't understand it. I'm like, not from what I can see. Not from what I can see at all. Because when you know, it's okay to have a bias and, you know, and kind of own it where people see where you're coming from. But some folks let it blind them to the point where they just kind of spew out like propaganda. And it's one thing to, like, I guess, believe all the propaganda yourself and to not know better about some of the things that you're saying. But I'm assuming that Glenn knows better with some of the stuff that he's saying. RC said Glenn is not a conservative. I definitely know that. But there were people who actually thought he was a conservative. And I guess it's because, you know, the different people on the right were like having him on, and he spoke out against Biden. Like, he didn't like a lot of the censorship and stuff around like Hunter's laptop and things like that. And that's when he started, I think, to really kind of rise in the eyes of like the right. I mean, I wasn't really very familiar with Glenn until that time myself. But just because some people say some things you like doesn't mean they're on your team. It doesn't mean you guys have the same ideology. It doesn't mean that you can trust certain people, that you should take them at their word face value. Just because someone says something that you like, it doesn't mean you're on the same side. And a lot of people know that, like, oh, they agree with me here on this thing. They're saying the rhetoric that I like to say, and I agree with that. And then they latch on so quick. That's how so many people get duped by so many grifters so quick. They say all the right things. They say all the right things. And it's too bad. But I just thought that was interesting. Some of the rhetoric he's saying. And of course, a lot of people are now talking about Candace Owens, because she did I didn't mention this to you guys last week, but maybe you already heard that she told people to get dishonorably discharged from the military to avoid having to go to Iran for war. And again, Trump is not George W. He doesn't want that kind of legacy or whatever, and it's really not necessary. Be in Iran for all that time for what? For what? You know? But that would be terrible and would follow them. It's not like, oh, you just okay, cool, thanks for stopping by, like that. But I don't understand. Like, we had this conversation last week. Like, why does she say the things that she says? I don't have I can't nail down an explanation. I have theories, but I don't understand why you'd go this far for attention. If it was for attention, like, she said some pretty controversial things, but I think at this point maybe she's really starting to cross some lines for some folks, because I am seeing people all over TikTok talk about some of the stuff that she's saying, and they're like, she's lost her mind now. I'm like, I've been saying stuff for a while. Y'all just weren't paying attention or didn't watch enough of her content. But another thing that she had said, I posted this on Facebook. Someone said Benjamin Netanyahu is everything the media wanted you to believe about Vladimir Putin is. And then Candace replied to that and said, feels a bit more like everything high school wanted me to believe about Adolf Hitler was. So she's saying Bibi is like Hitler, or what they want you to believe what Hitler was like. And I talked about this when it happened, but she came out with an episode of her show and this was post Daily Wire, about Hitler and how people like want you to believe like, oh, Hitler's the worst thing ever, and like he's the most terrible person. And she like did a whataboutism episode and was talking about the Allies, and basically go, well, he did concentration camps, but we had concentration camps. Talking about our internment camps, and like he killed innocent people. We killed innocent people. We dropped the bombs, and just trying to just do the moral relativism thing. And it was very bizarre. And even before that episode, she did an episode about psychiatry, and she mentioned Nazis burning books. And she's like, well, do you know what kind of books they were burning? They were burning these sexual gross books and stuff. And she didn't mention other kinds of books that Nazis burned, like anything they could find that was, by Jews or anything that could push up against their ideology and what they were trying to do. They didn't just burn naughty sexual books, right? So, and then she just referred to the brown shirts as like student activists, as if they weren't doing some other really shady, terrible things. So I've been paying attention to it for a while and speaking up, and I've got at least 2 videos on her, maybe 3. And I don't want to make it my life's mission to kind of follow her around and, do the alarm bells. But I'm glad, I guess, that people are seeing it. Someone said Marjorie Taylor Greene is now questioning the president. She said something that was, she said a couple things that were really crazy. Like she had mentioned, let me see if I can find it. Some people, she's like, well, nobody's died. And people are like, there's people from Georgia who have been killed because of Iran. And that's where you're from. So why don't you know that? Let me see if I can. Yeah. Okay, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she said, my thoughts on bombing Iran. I don't know anyone in America who has been the victim of a crime or killed by Iran, but I know many people who have been victims of crime committed by criminal illegal aliens or murdered by the cartel or Chinese fentanyl/drugs. Almost everyone in our country can relate to this fact. However, America has not dropped bunker busters on the cartel's sophisticated drug tunnels, launched tomahawks on a massive cartel poisonous drug operations, or gone to war against the cartel's international terrorist networks. Neocon warmongers beat their drums of war and act like, do you really think you can just like go into Mexico and be like, here's a bunker bomb to the cartels? Okay. it's sometimes you ain't gotta say everything, bruh. You can just if it's not your area of expertise, you can because it just seems like it's, I don't know, rhetoric, posturing for your domestic causes that are obviously very important, but you wouldn't just drop the mother of all bombs on the cartel like that, especially not, I guess, without the Mexican president's permission and all that stuff. It just okay. Neocon warmongers beat their drums of war and act like Billy Bad Bleeps going to war in countries most Americans have never seen and can't find on a map, but never find the courage to go to war against the actual terrorists who actually do kill Americans, invade our land, and make billions doing it day after day, year after year. I'm 51 years old. I'm Gen X. I've watched our country go to war in foreign lands for foreign causes on behalf of foreign interests for as long as I can remember. I was in 10th grade when Desert Storm started, and my father before me was sent to Vietnam, another senseless foreign war. America is $37 trillion of debt, and all these foreign wars have cost Americans trillions and trillions of dollars that never benefit any American. You guys could also cut spending, but you guys have issues with that. You're in Congress, ma'am. American troops have been killed and forever torn apart physically and mentally for regime change, foreign wars, and for military industrial base profits. I'm sick of it. I can easily say I support nuclear armed Israel's right to defend themselves, and also say the same time I don't want to fight or fund nuclear armed Israel's wars, nor any other country for that matter. I'm sick of funding foreign aid and foreign countries and foreign everything. I want to fund American interests and issues. I want great trade deals so American businesses and people can afford goods and be successful. I want low inflation and low interest rates. You got to cut some of that spending, babe, if you want that. I want American construction, housing, and manufacturing to boom. I want Americans to be rich and have the security in their future. I want my children's generations to have a great future. My kids are 22, 25, and 27. It pisses me beyond comprehension that my children's generations can't afford to buy a house, can't afford insurance, and have a little hope for their future. Americans are exhausted by all this, rightfully so. I can support President Trump and his great administration on many of the great things they are doing while disagreeing on bombing Iran and giving involved in a hot war that Israel started. That's not disloyalty. Critical thinking and having my own opinions is the most American thing ever, because contrary to what brainwashed Democrat boomers say, Trump is not a king, MAGA is not a cult, and President Trump has surrounded himself with people who once disagreed with him and even ran against him for president. Also, the same Democrats in Congress that are all of a sudden clutching their pearls about Trump bombing Iran finally supported and voted to fund dementia-ridden Biden's proxy war against Russia and Ukraine and stood by Biden's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Hypocrites is all they are, and they are just desperately trying to find solid ground to post Trump on, because so far they failed at grasping anything yet. Now what has been done is done, and Americans now fear Iranian terrorist attacks on our soil and being dragged into another war by Netanyahu when we weren't even thinking about any of this a week ago. We don't know what the future holds, and I pray for the safety of all people and an end to the constant demand for America to go to war. Enough is enough. Some of the stuff, I don't know if you have to tweet everything, if you have some kind of disagreement when you're on a team. Like, I'm a commentator, like it's what I'm going to do one way or another. You can make a call, I guess, and try to assess out your feelings with different colleagues and stuff. I've found a lot of, I don't know. We didn't need to read your diary on the internet, but anyway, here she got walloped because she said the thing about I don't know anyone in America who's been the victim of a crime or killed by Iran. And so this person pointed out 3 Army reservists headquartered at Fort Moore, Georgia, the state you represented, were killed by Iranian-backed militias just 18 months ago at their base in Jordan. Sergeant William Rivers, Special Kennedy Sanders, and Brianna Moffett, and so there's 3 people from her state that she didn't know or didn't come to mind. Maybe she didn't make any calls. But yeah, someone said Marjorie Taylor Greene being ignorant of the many American victims in the Islamic Republic is completely disqualifying. I've never been a big Marjorie Taylor Greene fan myself. I know people like that she's spicy and loud and whatnot, but she just, I don't know. To me, she seems kind of a little bit of the opposite end of what or I guess not the opposite end, but maybe the horseshoe of like a Jasmine Crockett. You know, she's loud and kind of a mess to me. Not as bad, and I think she's trying to be a bit more serious, but where's her staff? Like, do their staff help them write these things out and edit them? I'm just trying to. I think all their ranks were sergeant. Yeah, sergeant. So, yeah, Sergeant William Rivers, Sergeant Kennedy Sanders, Sergeant Brianna Moffett. So, where's their staff on this? Like, why don't you know? And even if you don't know, like, it is still true that they fund terror all over the place. And there were Americans who were Iran like funds and use these terror proxies all over, including Hamas, and they're responsible for October 7th. Like, and there were Americans that were taken that day. So you didn't need to put all this online. Like, I understand you got a lot of feelings, but what's the point of listing all this just to say that you oppose the president? Because I don't think you add anything serious to the conversation with some of the stuff that she was saying. Like, as far as what's an actual solution? Do you just think if you're loud enough, if there's enough loud voices, that it'll be able to stop Trump from advancing forward with any other sort of plans? Because you don't do that, I don't think, by Twitter. You like make some calls, or you have to actually like do some campaign stuff, because we might be chronically online, but a lot of people aren't. Like, in the real world, people, like, CNN did a poll, like, Americans agree with striking Iran and hitting the nuclear facilities. So some loud MAGA voices on Twitter aren't going to be able to stop the president from doing things that he thinks are international best interests. And if you have a better argument, pick up the phone. Pick up the phone. But if you need more political sway than that, you need to have a town hall and convince the people so they can make the calls and they can do the outcry. But just tweeting it into the atmosphere is not going to do anything. That's how activists operate. That's not how Congress people get stuff done. I don't know. I think we'll be okay, guys. Like, we'll be fine. People were freaking out when Trump did other kind of strikes, and we're okay. But the last thing I want to play for you guys before I go, Bill Maher years ago was talking about this kind of belief that these people hate us overseas because we keep getting involved in their stuff and their business. And Christopher Hitchens, who passed away some time ago, was on this episode, and he was like, no, it's deeper than that.
Can we stop saying, could we just agree on this? Could we stop saying that we're fighting them over there so that we don't have to fight them over here?
Yes.
They're fighting us over there because we're over there. A recent study by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, I know that sounds like a bullshit organization.
It is a bullshit organization.
It is?
Yeah.
Why do you say that? I heard it was a very...
I've been studying it for years. How much time have you got?
Well, anyway...
You can hardly pronounce its name. I've known it for a long time. It is a bullshit organization. It's like the Lancet and the casualty figures. It's a junk science by junk scholars.
But all right, tell me why I should believe.
However, you're right on your premise.
That they really want to fight us in Dollywood, but they're not.
Well, let me give you an example from Mr. Jefferson. Since you asked me to mention my book, which I happily do, available fine bookstores everywhere. In 1788, when the United States was barely a country,
right,
was having its sailors taken as slaves by the Barbary states, the states of the Ottoman Empire in North Africa.
Tripoli.
Tripoli.
Shores of Tripoli.
Shores of Tripoli. And its people, its ships stopped. Its crews carried off into slavery. We estimate 1.5 million European and American slaves taken between 1750 and 1815. Jefferson and Adams went to their ambassador in London and said, why do you do this to us? The United States has never had a quarrel with the Muslim world of any kind. We weren't in the Crusades. We weren't in the war in Spain. Why do you do this to our people and our ships? Why do you plunder and enslave our people? And the ambassador said very plainly, Mr. Abdul Rahman said, because the Quran gives us permission to do so, because you are infidels. And that's our answer. And Jefferson said, well, in that case, I will send a navy which will crush your state, which he did. And a good thing, too. Islamic fundamentalism is not created by American democracy. It's a lie to say so. It's a masochistic lie. And it excuses those who are the real criminals, and it blames us for the attacks made upon us.
Absolutely right. Now, he didn't like Christianity either, but definitely did not like Islam. I wonder what he would think about all the madness going on in the UK right now. Grooming gangs and so on and so forth. I saw somebody complain, I guess because people wanted to say that they're Asian grooming gangs. And they're like, they're not Japanese gangs. They're not Filipino gangs. Like, these are Muslim gangs. Like, what are you talking about? So, it's just, we're infidels, guys. That makes people uncomfortable. I'm not saying you got to fear all Muslims or whatever, but their book is their book, guys. I don't know what else to tell you. Their prophet, police be upon him, was a warmongering pedophile. It's just the truth. If that offends you, it just kind of is what it is. But we are infidels. Osama bin Laden, he didn't like our freedoms, but he didn't like our freedoms to not be Muslims and to sin and do all kinds of stuff. I don't, you know, there's things he said that I don't approve of or whatever that people do, but I'm not ready to go to war with someone for my faith differences. You know, I'm not willing to physically oppress someone to get someone to convert. I have a conversation with someone, share with them the gospel, and hope that the Lord does the rest. But some of these fundamentalists believe differently. And there's people in Iran who want freedoms that the oppressive regime will not let them have. Go look at videos prior to like 1979 in Iran. With the women look like American women. And now, they got to wear those hijabs and stuff. So anyway, that's it. That's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed, had fun. Please go blacktnews.com, check out different content, website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do, please consider leaving a donation on the site, because it does cost to stream, run the site, all the good stuff you guys can support. I very much appreciate you guys. You guys can check out merch on my site. You guys can check out different books that I have. There's a link in the description. It'll take you to Amazon page where you guys can see some of my books and so on. So go ahead and check that out. If you guys would like to see some of my sister's stuff and some of her prints and so on, her website is tinastextportraits.com. She does have a 30% off all of her prints. And she has more than just like political prints. She's got like Pokemon and Marvel stuff and Aliens, Predator, and just all kinds of stuff, like anything that she's interested in or might be at a Comic-Con she decided to make. So there's a lot of cool stuff you guys can check out. God bless you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.